The sun hung low over the quiet city of Lincoln Heights, a suburb just outside of Chicago. The hum of traffic and the soft chatter of pedestrians were drowned out by the roar of powerful motorcycles revving in the distance. The Black Rebels Motorcycle Club had been a staple in the city for years, causing a mixture of fear and fascination wherever they went. They were notorious for their wild parties, their dangerous runs, and their unrelenting control over the city's underbelly. Their leader, a man known as Grim, was the kind of guy who wore his reputation like a badge of honor. His jet black beard and steel-gray eyes gave him an intimidating look, and his leather jacket, adorned with patches of skulls and the Black Rebels insignia, struck fear in anyone who dared cross him. His crew followed him without question, whether he was pulling off a heist or just heading out for a night of chaos. They were the wolves of the city, and everyone else was just prey. But today, they would find out that not every predator is easy to catch. It all began at the Lincoln Heights Police Department's helicopter pad, a place that rarely saw any action. The pad, perched on the rooftop of the station, was typically reserved for police officers on special assignments, airlifting suspects, or emergency rescues. There was an air of authority to the place, a quiet place that most people wouldn't dare to disturb. But on that day, the Black Rebels were headed straight for it. Grim had received an anonymous tip about a shipment of cash being moved to a secure location, supposedly guarded by a handful of officers. The rebels were used to being the ones in control of the streets, but even they knew that police departments sometimes had hidden resources, and this particular shipment was worth the risk. As Grim's motorcycle roared down the street toward the helicopter pad, his crew followed close behind. They were suited up in their signature black leathers, their faces hidden behind helmets that reflected the setting sun. Grim had no intentions of turning back. Not now. Not when they had the chance to take everything they needed for their next big job. Miles away, Sergeant Michael Mick Harper was finishing his shift. Mick was a veteran of the Army, having served 2 tours in Afghanistan before making the switch to law enforcement. He was a man of few words, but his presence alone commanded respect. At 6'3", with broad shoulders and a calm demeanor, Mick had a reputation in the force for being an unshakable pillar of strength. The scars he bore from combat weren't just physical. They were mental. The weight of the things he'd seen abroad had never quite left him, but he had found a new purpose in protecting the people of Lincoln Heights. Mick was heading to the helipad to check on an incoming prisoner transport when he saw the motorcycles approach. His military instincts kicked in immediately. The Black Rebels. He had heard of them, seen them in passing. They weren't the kind of people you wanted to mess with, but Mick wasn't afraid of anyone or anything. Grim's motorcycle screeched to a halt at the edge of the helipad, and the other rebels followed suit, spreading out in formation. Mick took a breath, scanning the surroundings. He wasn't the type to back down, but this wasn't going to be easy. The rebels didn't do anything without making a mess of it first. "Grim, you really want to do this?" Mick asked, stepping forward with his arms crossed. His voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. Grim gave a low chuckle. "I don't think you're in a position to ask questions, soldier. Step aside or things are gonna get messy." Mick's eyes narrowed. He could feel the tension building, the kind that always preceded violence. But he wasn't going to back down. He had fought for his country. He had fought for the right to protect the innocent, no matter who was standing in front of him. "I'm not going anywhere," Mick replied. "This is a police facility. You don't get to just walk in here and take whatever you want." Grim's crew smirked, circling around Mick like wolves sizing up their prey. But Mick wasn't afraid. He knew what he was capable of. He had faced worse odds in his life, and he wasn't about to let a bunch of bikers run roughshod over the city he had sworn to protect. Time to teach this guy a lesson, Grim muttered to his crew. He nodded to one of the rebels, a bulky man named Tank who was already reaching for a crowbar. In a flash, Tank lunged toward Mick, swinging the crowbar with deadly precision. Mick reacted instinctively, sidestepping the attack and delivering a quick knee to Tank's gut. The man grunted, stumbling back but didn't fall. Mick wasn't giving up ground, not to anyone. But as Mick focused on Tank, two other rebels rushed in from the side, tackling him to the ground. The air was thick with adrenaline, the sound of boots slamming against concrete and the growl of engines revving in the background. The rebels were relentless, trying to overwhelm him with sheer numbers. For a moment, it seemed like the bikers were going to win. But Mick had something they didn't experience. He rolled over onto his back, throwing an elbow into one rebel's stomach and kicking the other off of him with surprising strength. He was back on his feet in a matter of seconds, his body moving with the fluidity of someone who had spent years in combat. "Enough," Grim shouted, his voice cold as ice. "Take him down." The command was clear, and the remaining rebels closed in, but Mick wasn't finished yet. He reached into his tactical vest, pulling out a small, non-lethal stun gun. With a swift motion, he fired it at the nearest rebel, sending the man to the ground with a convulsive jolt. Grim's eyes widened, his face twisting in fury. "You think you can stop us with that?" Mick didn't answer. He moved with the calm precision of a soldier who had faced combat far worse than this. He grabbed another rebel, using his momentum to slam him into the side of the helicopter pad's metal railing. The rebel crumpled to the ground. Grim took a step back, watching as his crew was systematically taken apart. He had underestimated the soldier, and now it was costing him. "You're making a big mistake," Grim spat, his eyes full of venom. "You don't know who we are." Mick stood tall, his posture unwavering. "I know exactly who you are," he said quietly. "And it's time you learned who I am." Grim, furious and humiliated, made one last, desperate charge, but Mick was ready. With a single, well-timed movement, Mick ducked and then swept Grim off his feet with a powerful leg sweep. The biker leader landed hard on the ground, gasping for breath as Mick stood over him, his expression calm and resolute. "This is my city," Mick said, his voice cold but steady. "And if you think you can take whatever you want, you've got another thing coming." As Grim lay there, his crew subdued and defeated, the sound of sirens could be heard in the distance. Backup was on the way. Mick had done what needed to be done. The black rebels had messed with the wrong soldier. Hours later, the police department was bustling with activity, as the last of the black rebels were hauled away in handcuffs. Mick stood at the edge of the helipad, watching as the sun finally dipped below the horizon. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't looking for recognition. But he knew that sometimes, when evil reared its ugly head, someone had to stand firm and push back. And today, that someone had been him. The black rebels would be back. That much was certain. But the next time they came for the city, they'd remember the soldier who wasn't afraid